What is up, guys? I'm Kachurin, your commissioner of the Casual Cup, bringing you my personal power rankings for Season 1. Quick disclaimer, these rankings reflect only what I think of the teams. If you have a different opinion on some of the placings, let's talk about it. I'd love to hear other ideas. Now, given that this is the start of the season, and I haven't ever actually seen a lot of our coaches play competitive Pokemon before, I'm doing this power ranking based solely on the teams themselves, how well they work together, and what tools they have to pull at the Ws. I'm also going to try and get through this fairly quickly. I won't be going super in-depth on each of the teams, so if you want to see that, there's a very lengthy draft analysis video done by myself and Mikkel that you can check out to get our thoughts on each individual team. With that said, let's hop right into the first four teams. Starting from the bottom, we have the Cosmic Crobats at number 16, drafting Mega Abomasnow, Azumarill, Alolan Ninetales, Cloyster, Alolan Sandslash, Manectric, Mandibuzz, Nidoking, Lucario, and Pyukumuku. Look, I'm sorry, Crow. I really wanted to see you go nuts this season after having a, let's say, subpar Season 0, but I just can't see it with what you drafted. Crow went hard on Hail offense, leaving his team with a lot of crippling weaknesses, namely Fire, Electric, and Rock. If his team is in control of the game, Hail offense can certainly do work with Sandslash with Slush Rush, Alolan Ninetales, Cloyster, and others, but if he's on the back foot, his best defensive pivots for covering those weaknesses are Nidoking and regular Manectric, which aren't very impressive in that role. Unfortunately, I can't put the Crobats anywhere but number 16 with such huge crippling weaknesses. Moving on to number 15, the Honorable Houndooms, coached by Fencer, with Mega Houndoom, Mew, Suicune, Gigalith, Hitmonlee, Electrode, Porygon Z, Crocodile, Stakataka, and Drampa. Fencer was another coach from the test season who did okay. Unfortunately though, I find his draft this time around to be an awful lot weaker. Much like the Crobats, he has some huge holes in his team defensively, one of the biggest being the fighting type. 6 of his Mons are weak to it, and he only has 1 that resists it. On top of that, he only has 1 Mon with super effective stab to hit waters, being Electrode, and the happy little Pokeball doesn't really have the power required to break a lot of the bulky waters we saw drafted. The team is also fairly slow, with the exception of Electrode and the unburdened Hitmonlee, so unfortunately Fencer will be forced to play the defensive game a lot, and like I said, when you've got such open weak points, playing defense is not something you want to be doing. The team does have some impressive versatility with things like Mew, which is what I feel gives it the edge over the Crobats. Number 14 is the Muslim Mewtwo's, coached by Yu, with Mega Medicham, Clefable, Magnezone, Tornadus, and Thundurus Incarnate, Amistar, Torterra, Komala, Cryogonal, and Toucannon. Like I've been saying with the other two teams, that defensive coverage is really dragging this team down. Yu has 4 Mons weak to fighting, 3 Flyers weak to rocks, and a number of ice weaknesses as well. Fortunately for Yu, his team edges the other two below him out in that he actually has some pretty nice speed tiers with the Genies and Cryogonal, as well as the base 100 Mega Medicham with Priority in Bullet Punch and Fake Out. This helps patch up weak defenses pretty nicely because it's going to be easier for the Mewtwo's to remain on the offensive. But having such huge holes is not something that can be completely overlooked just for speed tiers. Yu's team also has some problems removing hazards, with 4 of the 5 Mons that get removal being weak to Stealth Rocks. Still, those faster Mons definitely bump Yu's team up a bit in my books. And finally, number 13, the Windsor Wurmples, coached by Turkeyzilla, drafting Mega Sharpedo, Scizor, Nihilego, Serena, Magmortar, Piloswine, Sylveon, Latios, Quagsire, and Dustox. Turkey here is brand new to competitive battling, and for the little knowledge he was working with, he actually has a pretty solid draft. He picked up the Fire, Water, Grass, and Steel Dragon Fairy type cores quite nicely, as well as a heck of a lot of bulk. This team is very fat, but unfortunately, with great bulk comes poor speed. Save for Latios, this team has a crippling speed issue, with nothing like a good Trick Room or Sticky Webs to help patch it up. The Wurmples are likely to be playing on the back foot in most of their games, much like some of the other lower ranked teams, but they have that good bulk and defensive coverage that could allow them to find success in that position, which puts them a rung higher than those below. Moving on to the next 4 teams, ranked number 12, we have the Staggering Star Raptors, coached by Siderius. This team has Mega Camerupt, Dragonite, Rotom Wash, Arcanine, Ambipom, Glaceon, Tangrowth, Bisharp, Mimikyu, and Barbaracle. If you want to talk about bulk, talk to the Star Raptors. This team is huge. Mons like Rotom Wash, Tangrowth, Arcanine, and Multiscale Dragonite threaten to be impossible to take down, while also having a decent offensive presence in their own right. Couple that with the terrifying Trick Room option this team has, with Mega Camerupt being one of the most potent Trick Room threats there is, and Mimikyu being arguably the most potent setter, given its disguise ability, and you can clearly see what direction this team is going. On the flip side, however, a great Trick Room option means the team is lacking something very important: speed. This team is as slow as it is bulky, and that is unfortunately a very difficult weakness to work around if you can't get that Trick Room offense going. It does have some priority options across the board, but I just don't think that's enough to cover for the distinct lack of any exceptionally fast threats, especially with all the crazy speed this league has running around. All the same, this team's synergy and overall insane bulk have it sitting pretty above the bottom 4. Number 11 is the Garrigmok Garchomps, with coach Kaiser Cricket, with his Mega Garchomp, Tapu Bulu, Alakazam, Empoleon, Diancie, Spiritomb, Entei, Blissey, Toxicroak, and Oricorio. Here we have the man who had arguably the worst draft in our test season. Like Crow with his hail, Cricket went hard on sand and it didn't do him too good. This season, however, he's wisened up and actually got himself a pretty decent team. Crazy offensive threats like Garchomp, Tapu Bulu, Alakazam, and Entei, backed up by defensive juggernauts like Empoleon, Diancie, and Blissey, give this team a very solid foundation to stand on. Unfortunately, that foundation doesn't really have the room to bend under pressure and is liable to just snap. The biggest flaw that holds this team back for me is a lack of versatility, one of the cornerstones of the draft format. A lot of the mons here are one-hit wonders, and opponents of this team will have a pretty easy time prepping for them. There is some surprise in Garchomp and Tapu Bulu, but the rest of the team just doesn't have that X factor that would allow the Garchomps to grab wins against tougher opponents. Overall, the team is solid, which leaves it quite comfortably at number 11. Number 10 is going to be the Ace Alolan Ninetales, coached by Sword of Strife. They drafted Mega Gardevoir, Garchomp, Klefki, Metagross, Rotom-Mow, Lapras, Talonflame, Kyurem Black, Charizard, and Golem. Now this is a team that, at first glance, I actually really like. A great offensive presence with Mega Guard and Garchomp, and Kyurem Black with awesome defensive mons like Klefki and Rotom. Unfortunately, there are a handful of things holding the team back. While its core is great, there are a lot of common weaknesses that can put huge dents in this team. Rotom and Garchomp both suffer versus ice types, and Klefki, Rotom, and Metagross all fall victim to fire. On top of that, 4 of the mons here are weak to Stealth Rocks, with 2 of those being 4 times weaknesses. Despite these weaknesses, however, if Sword of Strife plays his team well, it's got so much power and so much versatility with the defensive core that wins are not going to be a foreign thing. Due to those defensive holes, though, I can't put the team any higher than it is. And last but not least, for the bottom half of the table, we have Ryan DCB and the Vigrid Vespiquen, bringing the Mega Blastoise, Mamoswine, Kartana, Chandelure, Drapion, Palisand, Togekiss, Reuniclus, Vikavolt, and Beware. Like some of the teams before it, Ryan's team has great synergy defensively and some powerhouse mons on the offense. It's also got a pretty neat Trick Room option with Reuniclus, Chandelure, Vikavolt, and Mega Blastoise. This, however, means that the team is rather slow. With the exception of Kartana, this team has no impressively fast Pokemon, and as we get into the higher placed teams, we'll see why I keep saying this. Speed tiers matter so much in competitive Pokemon. If you can't outspeed one of your opponent's threats, it's just going to blow through your team without much issue. Fortunately for Ryan though, speed aside, his team is very well put together, great hazard setters, power, and bulk, and not one mon that the opponent can really count out. Kicking off the top half of the power ranking, we have number 8, the London Lycanroc, coached by Mikkel, bringing us Mega Manectric, Landorus Therian, Toxapex, Lycanroc Dusk, Virizion, Articuno, Incineroar, Gardevoir, Savali, and Noivern. If you want to talk about speed tiers, the Lycanroc will talk to you about speed tiers. Mikkel's team is an offensive behemoth with crazy speed and crazy offense, coupled with a great Volt Turn core to keep up the momentum and keep battles playing in his favor. This team is terrifyingly hard to wall out, especially with Open Z, which is what puts it in the upper echelon over the slower, bulkier teams we've seen. Unfortunately, I can't put this team any higher due to its frailty. Toxapex, Incineroar, Savali, and even Lando can take a few hits, but the rest of the mons have... we have here just really can't. If Mikkel ever finds himself playing on the back foot, he's going to have a very hard time swinging the game back around because he just doesn't have the tools to take hits and play that defensive game. On top of which, he has some pretty poor hazard removal. 2 of his 4 defoggers are weak to rocks, and Lando doesn't really want to be playing defense on this team, leaving mainly Silvally as a remover. Having rocks up cripples his team a lot with its hit and run Volt Turn core, so I can see that being another issue for Mikkel. Overall though, an insanely powerful team, and as long as Mikkel can apply that pressure, he's going to be taking some very fast, very convincing wins. Number 7 on this here PR goes to the Venezuelan Vaporeons, with Sentient Coffee drafting Megazard X, Tapu Fini, Volcarona, Tentacruel, Gastrodon, Cradily, Delmise, Rotom Heat, Passimian, and Skuntank. Now I just spent a while talking about speed being king, and this team isn't exactly the fastest, but what puts it above the rest is the way it works together. This team has 3 scary sweeper threats in Zard, Volcarona, and Fini, who can all set up and steal games handily with defensive pivots like Tentacruel and Rotom, giving that momentum these mons need to find their way in to set up and go to town. I really like the thought of having all these scary sweepers in the back while powerful defensive mons just put on the pressure and facilitate those setup moves when the time is right. Holding this team back, however, is a lack of coverage and a weakness to rocks. Defensively, the team is fine, with the secondary types covering up the multiple grasses and waters nicely, notably ground covering the electric weakness for Gastrodon, grass covering the poison covering the grass weakness for Tentacruel, and the list goes on. But offensively, it's a little lacking. And the rocks, oh the rocks. With 2 of those aforementioned sweepers being 4 times weak to rocks, and one of the effective removers having a weakness as well, rocks could be a problem. However, Skuntank and Finny are waiting in the wings to help resolve that issue. If this team is played right, I can see a lot of setup and sweep victories coming out for it. Moving on to number 6, we have kind of an odd team, the Williamsburg Whimsicots with Coach Pantros and co-coach Incog, bringing us Mega Steelix, Jirachi, Hydreigon, Alolan Raichu, Walrein, Victini, Minior, Hitmontop, and Dusknoir. I wasn't really sure where to place this team because I don't really know what a lot of it does. However, that's exactly what I think makes it so good. The name of the game for draft leagues is versatility, having a lot of different options to outplay your opponent in prep before the battle even begins, and this team has it in spades. Mons like Jirachi, like Whimsicott, and like Victini have all sorts of tools to catch opponents off guard and blow through them when the time is right. On top of that, the team has a lot of great bulk, especially in the Steelix, and some crazy offense in Hydreigon, Raichu, and a shell-smashing Minior. The biggest problem I can see with this team is speed. While it's not horrible, it's not great either. The fastest Mons present are Alolan Raichu at base 110 and Minior at 120 in Shield's down form. Respectable, but not quite enough for those crazy fast threats running around. A Choice Scarf can help, as well as Prankster moves from Whimsicott, but I can definitely see speed becoming an issue for this team, which is what holds it back from the tippy top for me. At number 5 is the Charming Chandelures, coached by Uni. This team has Mega Aerodactyl, Infernape, Nidoqueen, Kyurem, Xatu, Zebstrika, Keldeo, Bronzong, Machamp, and Aromatisse. This is just a great team. Some great fast offensive threats, fantastic walls and wall breakers, potent hazard setters, support, priority, a Trick Room option. This team has it all, so why is it only number 5? Well, the team has a pretty bad psychic weakness for one. If you've been paying attention, you'll have noticed the plethora of psychic threats running around, like Zam, Regular and Mega Guard, etc. Uni has 4 mons that are weak to the psychic type, 3 of them being incredibly important, and only 2 resists that don't really threaten those heavy hitters back. On top of that, if you don't look at Xatu, the hazard game for the Chandelures is a little lacking. Of course, the team does have Xatu, so it's not all bad, but if the Psychic Bird goes down early, this team will have a hard time playing a drawn-out hazard war of attrition. Overall, though, this team is great, but its heavy reliance on 1 or 2 Pokemon to handle big facets of the game, and that Psychic weakness keep it out of the top 4. And here we are, what are, in my opinion, the best 4 drafts in Season 1 of the Casual Cup. Wasting no time, let's start with number 4, the Philadelphia Flareons, coached by Jaden. Jaden drafted Mega Sceptile, Necrozma, Hippowdon, Blastoise, Sigilyph, Flareon, Landorus Incarnate, who is restricted to Sandforce, Scolipede, Florges, and Togedemaru. The Flareons have great speed tiers, with the added speed boost Scolipede and Sceptile's insane base 145, tons of power, great bulk, and lots of coverage. There's also a huge X factor in this team, with mons like Landorus and Necrozma having tons of options for Z moves and crazy sets. Speaking of Landorus, there is a Hippowdon on this team to support its Sandforce, meaning this thing is going to be dropping tactical nukes on all of the opposition, virtually unopposed. You can't wall it out, this mon is a threat. There's not many flaws in this team, but if I had to pick one, I'd say it comes down to how this team can play from behind. If another player gets the upper hand on Jaden early on, I can see a lot of struggles to get back into the game, mostly because the defensive mons in this squad are super linear. Sigilyph has like one set, and Florges isn't threatening much aside from Moonblast and Toxic. And Hippowdon and Togedemaru don't have an awful lot of coverage or power to help swing the game back around after switching in to take a hit. Blastoise and Necrozma are decent defensive options, however, with a lot of different moves available to them to catch the opposition off guard. Obviously this team is number 4, so even that small crack in the armor I can nitpick does have a few band-aid solutions. Moving on to number 3, Benji's Mischievous Murkrows. Ben brought us Mega Diancie, Heatran, Zeraora, Snorlax, Golbat, Claydol, Gyarados, Ferrothorn, Primeape, and Sableye. This team's story is more or less the same as the last. Stellar speed and offense, great bulk, coverage, hazard game, you name it. What I feel gives the Murkrows the edge over the Flareons though is the versatility in their offense as well as the pressure that their defense puts out. Zeraora and Heatran are terrifying offensive threats, mostly in that they have tons of different options. Tons of Z-moves, Z-move potential. Zeraora can go on either physical or special, and Heatran can play the defense as well. On top of Heatran, most of the defensive mons on this squad are also incredible threats in their own right. Snorlax and Gyarados also pack quite a punch, and Golbat can U-turn to keep momentum, making up for its apparent lack of power. The team has some great support in Claydol and Sableye as well, Sableye especially boasting the Prankster ability and tons of interesting moves. Where this team falters, however, is very similar to the last as well. Like I mentioned, Golbat has little offensive presence, and lots of mons can sit nicely in front of Claydol and Ferrothorn. These mons present a juicy opportunity for an opposing sweeper to perhaps set up, especially considering how vital all 3 of them are to Benji's hazard game. It's a small issue, but it's present nonetheless, and is mostly what keeps me from putting the Murkrows any higher on the list. Number 2, finally, my very own Oshawotts. I drafted Mega Scizor, Tornadus Therian, Goodra, Araquanid, Meltank, Alolan Golem, Slurpuff, Delphox, Rotom Ghost, and Dugtrio. Hey, at least I didn't put my team at number 1 and call it a day. I understand my team doesn't actually look insanely good at first glance, but I feel it's how everything works so well together that puts it a notch above the rest. A lot of the mons aren't super quick, but I've got 2 Sticky Webbers to help with that. Scizor is weak on the special side, and especially to fire, but Goodra covers them beautifully with its huge special bulk, and Scizor covers the Ice Dragon weakness with its great defense and steel typing. The Sticky Web's up and 3 U-turners as well as 1 Volt Switcher, 2 Volt Switchers. This team keeps the control and pivots into trappers like Golem and Dugtrio to eliminate threats with absolutely no room for the opponent to keep out of it. And even without momentum, the defense this team has is still huge, with things like Tornadus and Araquanid eating hits and U-turning out to turn the tides back into my favor again. If I had to find a weakness for me, I'd say it's definitely my ability to set rocks. Rocks are very good against a lot of the teams in this league, and while I have 3 setters, Golem and Dugtrio don't actually want to be doing that job most of the time, which leaves it up to only Meltank to keep that hazard pressure on. Overall, that's not a huge problem, but hey, I needed some reason to not put myself at number 1. And with that, here we are, the team that I think is just the best one out there, the Krabby Club, coached by Cobb and co-coached by Ethan. They have Mega Gallade, Tapu Koko, Milotic, Cobalion, Blaziken with the Blaze ability, Lurantis, Dragalge, Azelf, Clawitzer, and Dusclops. This team combines so many of the great things I've highlighted about other teams. Great speed, absurd offense, Volt Turn momentum, good hazard control, great coverage, and more. But unlike some of the other teams that had all these great things, the Krabby Club has some absolutely stellar defense to back it up. Mons like Milotic, Lurantis, and Cobalion can switch into a lot of things without risk and actually put out huge pressure on their own, unlike many other defensive pivots that were drafted. That defensive power is the absolute biggest thing that gives this team the edge over the rest. Being able to just soak a hit on a switch in and immediately have momentum back in your favor, because that defensive mon is also an offensive threat, is huge. I can't stress it enough. This team is nigh impossible to wall out and is going to be super hard to break. I'm very excited to see what these 2 can do with it. And there we have it, folks. That is, in my opinion, the power ranking of the 16 teams in the Casual Cup, based on strength of draft. Again, if you want to hear more of what I think of the teams, as well as what Mikkel thinks, please go watch the draft analysis, and if you have some different opinions about who is the top of the top or who is the bottom of the barrel, let me know. I love to talk about it some more. Here's to an exciting Season 1, everybody. See you in the next one.